Hey everyone, I am on my lunch from my regular job trying to do this intro. I am so sorry it's taken this long to get this video out. Now, what I wanted to do was take some items that are normally kind of small and give them a grander, larger scale. Show you all how to take small items, adding them to other things to make them look even more grand. I just wanted to say thank you to all my new subscribers and all the love that I got on my last video. You all are so amazing. And if you stay until the end, I have a little dark and moody project that I wanted to share with you. This first project, we are not going to make it larger than what it is. However, we are definitely going to make this look grander than what it is. Now, this is just a plastic mantle clock that has a picture in it. I think that's the Lord's Supper. It was only $1.50, and I thought, you know, the clock doesn't work. I did put a battery in it and tried it, and I thought, you know, we're going to give this new life. Instead of sending this to the landfill, we're going to turn this into something that someone may love, because when we get finished, I'm going to be putting this in my vendor booth for sale. First, I want to go ahead and give this a good clean. It had a lot of dust and buildup on it. I'm going to get it taken apart to a point, because the back, you can take the back off, but there's nothing there. It doesn't get you into this clock part, so you have to go from the front. So I'm just taking a little scraper and kind of popping everything off to get to that paper area. I go ahead and take off the little hands from the clock and try to take that paper off. And as I was thinking about it, I knew I wanted to make this into kind of like a cloche or a globe with something in it, but there was not enough space in the front and you couldn't do anything with the back. So I thought, you know, I'm just going to cut this whole circle out of here. So that's what I ended up doing. I had thought about just replacing the paper, but you'll see we go ahead and cut that whole circle out. And it wasn't that hard because, like I said, this is just hard plastic. Once we get this cut out of here, what I'm going to do is trim off with that knife anything that might be kind of sticking out, and then I'm going to take my little sander and just sand smoothly around this edge. At this time, I hadn't figured out exactly how I was going to do this piece, but I didn't really need to sand this part. But if you're going to be doing a clock like this and that area is going to show, the sanding will definitely help smooth it out before you paint this. Now, I was thinking about what I needed to do to put inside here to make my little scene in, and I started digging through, of course, my thrifted things, and I have this little 50-cent, like, I think it's a stovepipe thing, and then I have this part of the base of a lamp. Well, the stovepipe thing didn't fit, and I think that's what it is. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but this lamp base fit perfect. So what we did was we went ahead and gave this a good coat and a half of French eggshell by Fusion. The first coat almost covered everything. It was beautiful, perfect. It went on great. I let that dry. And then I started putting that base inside. Now, I wanted to use some E6000 because the lamp base is actually brass, so I thought that this would work for a long-term hold, and I think I did put a little bit of hot glue for the short-term hold, but I'm not sure I show that on here. So once I got my glue in place, then I just inserted the piece and made sure that it got in contact with that glue to get this base started. While I was going through my junk, I also found a metal plate that came out of some of these lamps, and it's going to fit perfect down in the main part of that brass insert. I have these gorgeous papers, and I thought I wanted to put one of these images on here, but I wasn't quite sure still at this time what was going to be the theme of this. Well, I found this other half of this paper, and it has these gorgeous dresses and sort of like mannequin type look to it, sort of like haberdashery and millinery. And I thought, okay, I've done several pieces in the past, even on my mass making, with sewing theme, and they all sold. Anything that I've done sewing in my for my vendor booth has sold, just so you know, for those who have watched my previous videos. So we're gonna use some regular glue. The kind that I like, of course, is the Recollections. I have it linked in the description box below. I'm using the stick glue to put this on, and then we're going to cut off all the edges and sand the edges smoothly with a little sandpaper. After that, I'm going to go ahead and use my StazOn black ink to go around those edges just to kind of finish that off. Before we add the piece in, we're going to bring that paint on the inside of this. Now that I kind of know what I'm doing with it, I need to bring that paint on in the inside of this. Once this paint dries, we'll use that same glue process with the E6000 and some hot glue to put that plate in there so it'll hold permanently. If you don't know, you use the hot glue just as a temporary hold. It will not hold this metal onto that plastic. So that's where the E6000, once it dries, it usually takes a good day to dry very well, then this piece will be permanent in there. All right, so now comes some of the fun part. I have a little container here to the left that I keep some vintage, sort of old looking sewing things in it. So when I have projects, I can add this type of stuff to it. So I've just grabbed one of these little old wooden bobbins with thread on it, or spools, and I'm adding a pair of scissors that are they're not old, they're just a metal finding. You can pick up packages with scissors and rulers and sewing machines and things like that at Hobby Lobby in their scrapbooking section or paper products section. So I'm adding some hot glue and again that E6000 because we're going to add this onto the paper and we don't want it to fall off. This is going to be our focal point to put all of our other little findings and items around. Now I love how this is looking. The background is just going to blend in so well. I've picked the right colors. I'm showing you, this is some Tim Holtz Ideology little quote tags. We're going to be using one of those and some other little findings like buttons, thimbles, vintage pins or safety pins, just some little things out of this little bucket that I have. I found this cute little sewing machine. It was like, had a little hook on it. You could put it on like a charm bracelet. I just went ahead and cut the top, that little ring off, added a little bit of rub and buff to the top of it to make that, where I cut that off, blend in. And you can see that I did that. I did it off camera, and then put some of that glue, and I'm just going to put it on that spool of thread because it's so tiny. I don't want it to get lost in that paper, and I know that people will be able to see it right on the front of that spool of thread. We're going to do the same process with the rest of these pieces, and I'm just going to put these as I think they will look good. I kind of, especially with like the little bobbin for the sewing machine, I put it up in the kind of right hand corner in between two buttons to give a symmetry that balances. And then I also take the thimble and that little medallion that's got the saying on it and make sure that they offset from the heavier pieces. You'll see as I go through and do this. I wanted to let you know again that some of these I use just hot glue. If they're really lightweight, like these buttons, they're not going to have any problem sticking to that paper. The paper's not going anywhere, it's stuck on that metal. So this is going to be a project or a piece that someone can cherish and put in their sewing room for a long time. I just think it's a great way to make over a piece and make it purposeful instead of it ending in a landfill. Now, when I say purposeful, I mean give someone joy to look at, make them feel good. And a lot of times the items like this sell in my booth as gifts, and people love getting one-of-a-kind unique items that no one else will ever have, and that brings them joy. Receiving a gift like this, that brings someone joy. Giving a gift like this and just looking at items that bring those memories can mean a lot to someone. And like I said, in this day and time, getting joy from just looking at something is definitely purposeful to me. So I'm adding some flowers down at the bottom just because there was that little piece from the lamp that I kind of wanted to cover up. And I also, because this is a sewing theme, I thought why not add a few little frilly flowers that kind of go in with the whole color arrangement. Once I get that finished, I'm going to add some rub and buff around the rim of this to kind of brighten it up, even though it's already brass. I'm not covering it completely because I don't mind some of that antique color coming through. I wasn't real sure how I was going to add this plastic globe or covering back on this, and I really wanted to add it to this brass that I'm at, the brass area that I am adding the rub and buff to right now, but I knew there was no way to just put it straight on there without having that raw edge or trying to figure out something to go around it. So I decided to use the original plastic off of this, and what I did was I hot glued that clear piece inside of this rim. Now I'm adding some of that rub and buff so it will blend in with the lamp piece. And because that edge wasn't perfect on the plastic and the rim, I went ahead and did that kind of shadowy effect of the gold on the actual clear plastic, kind of like a window that's been cleaned and they leave the edges, especially when you see like really old buildings. So I'm just dabbing that rub and buff kind of around the edges and giving it that sort of like halo look. Okay, so then we're going to go ahead and add some of that on the inside. Of course, we want to make sure that that rub and buff is kind of hit and miss on different areas of this piece because we're going to have it on the outside too. You'll see that coming up. Before we add this wax on the outside, I always like to have either a clear coat or a clear wax to kind of give me a barrier so that my wax doesn't just soak right into that paint. Now this paint has a sealer in it, but it's very flat once it dries, and I knew that it would be best if I go ahead and add just some clear wax or a sealer, and the clear wax is easier because you don't have to wait on it to dry. Just kind of wipe some of it back and then start adding whatever color wax you want. And if you get too much, since you have that clear coat on there, you can go ahead and wipe some of that back. And if it won't wipe back good, you can put some clear wax on a paper towel or a cloth, and it'll kind of erase if you get too much of whatever color wax you're using. Now, of course, once these waxes dry and cure, you will not be able to just wipe them off. This is just during the initial process that you can do this. So ultimately what we're wanting is for this to kind of look like an antique, have some shading, not just the color of paint with no depth to it. So that's what we're doing here. We have a couple more things that's going to bring this to its grand level. First, we're going to add this covering, and I'm going to use some of the super glue with the instant activator because I don't want to use hot glue or the E6000 because it's very thick, and I want this to seal directly onto that rim without having big bumps of glue underneath it. So the super glue is really thin, and then the activator makes it seal immediately, and it really did its job, you guys. This looked so good once I got it on there and got that glue. I'm going to go ahead, and you can see right now, just spray that activator, and the activator dries. It doesn't mess up your paint. You can't even tell it's there once it dries, I guess because it has high alcohol content. Now, this is the part that's going to make this clock base look even more grand. I know it's not a clock anymore, but we're going to take that same color of rub and buff and use these wood floral cutouts. But before we do that, I forgot that I did go ahead and add some of that paint onto our original gold ring because I just felt like there was too high of a stack of gold. So adding this around that really blended it in further with the clock and didn't make it look like it stuck out kind of weird, if that makes sense. And then we put some more rub and buff back over that a little bit, and I think it really makes a big difference. You guys know I'm not afraid to share things that I think need to be changed as I go along in projects. That's when you learn the most about what your project's going to look like and what you think needs to be changed. Don't hesitate to do that to get the project to the level that you feel like it needs to be. So I'm just taking some TITEBOND Quick and Thick because these are wood pieces, and I felt like that would be the best for these wood pieces onto the plastic, and adding 3 of them. I just love how these made this piece look so much more grand. And I take some rub and buff and go along the back of the top piece because I put that up high so it would give this a taller peak. And then you can just paint whatever the color of your piece is on the very back so it blends in well. I love how this piece turned out. I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say about it. If you like this content, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Once we get to the end of this video, there'll be a little pop-up on the screen with my face on it. If you hit that, you'll automatically be subscribed to this channel. All right, our next piece is gonna be something definitely a little different. I have a gorgeous piece of, I think it's like cast iron, or it's definitely some type of metal, and it's just not large enough, and I needed something to make it look more grand. Of course, that's what the video is about. And so I grabbed this vintage Americana piece that I had in my stash. I paid $4 for it. We're gonna remove the back piece and we're gonna remove that knob. I don't know why they had the knob at the very top of this. I guess maybe to hang something long down off of it, but we're gonna flip it around and use it the other way. I'm going to be giving it a good coat of this raw silk by Fusion because I'm going to add a decoupage paper on this by Prima. Their decoupage paper, the fabric kind of freaks me out, but look at this. Oh my goodness, you guys. I'll try to have a link for this in the description box below. It's not expensive at all, and I'm in love. So we are using this for the background of our gorgeous piece. I'm gonna go ahead and use a good coat of Mod Podge on the board, lay this down, and because there's so much Mod Podge on the board, it soaks through pretty well. And I add a little bit more and some water to saturate the piece all the way through. And I let that dry, actually end up letting it dry overnight. And it turns out beautiful on this board. Now this type of paper almost feels like a dryer sheet. It feels cloth-like but vented. I don't know, it's hard to explain. And you just do it the same way you do regular decoupage paper. I decided right at the end I would grab some saran wrap or these little plastic things and just go all over it, getting it really good and soaked in. I also add a little water by spraying it just to help that Mod Podge soak through. Now we have our gorgeous piece. It is dry, and I'm going to take my little sander and just sand all the edges and pull that decoupage paper off. It kind of tears off like cloth as well. And it's really easy. It's, like I said, it's similar to regular decoupage paper. Once I get all those edges off, we will be painting that. With Fusion's cast iron, I love this color and it blends real well with the colors that's in this paper. I'm just gonna go around all the edges, and once I finish this, I'll do the whole back with it, but I don't do the backs until I'm completely finished with the project so that I make sure everything's dry and I don't have to worry about the back of it trying to dry while I'm working on my project. Another thing, if you paint your back before you do anything else, after you have it laying on your workspace, sometimes things get on it, other paint colors, so I just leave that till the very end. It works out best for me. We're going to go ahead and take this cast iron and sort of do a halo or a vignette around the edges, blending that paper in with that paint, plus giving those edges a darker look. Once that dries, I grab my gold rub and buff. We've used a lot of gold in this video, so if you're not a gold fan, you can definitely replace these with silver, black, any color you want. This is just for inspiration, but I do the same thing. I take the gold and kind of go around all those edges because the piece we're going to add onto this that we're trying to make look larger is actually a gold color. So I had a project in mind for this, and I knew that I needed to add several pieces to get this the look that I wanted. So grab some of my metal corners, and they need to match my gold that I've got going on. So we're just going to do the same, and I'm going to use this fancy little handle to go in place of that knob. Originally I had a single knob, but I thought this one definitely would look better. So I'm just going to cover these with some of that Rub and Buff and get them prepared. We're going to put all these 4 metal pieces on the corners, and that knob is going to go under our piece that's going to be the focal point. So I just use some little gold nails to tap these in on each of the corners, and we're going to work on the focal point coming up. I found this heavy. It feels like cast iron. I don't think it is. It's definitely some type of iron piece for 99 cents at one of my favorite thrift stores. So we're gonna do a couple of things to this before we put it on our large background. Isn't this piece gorgeous for 99 cents? I know it's truly old, and how old I do not know, but I wanted to freshen up the gold just a little bit, and I didn't cover all the original because that's okay. I want some of that showing through, and I thought I would add some of this Prima wax in. It's not, is it? Yeah, it's called Sage, and it just kind of looks like it has patinaed this gold without having to do a lot of stuff to it, but I didn't want much. The sage actually matches the gold or the greens that's in the background. I also forgot, you see me, I'm grabbing some of Debbie's Design Diary gold wax in Golden Rule to give this a few little highlights that are a little brighter than either of those golds, and you can kind of see how it does that on here. Because there are some lighter like taupes and beiges in our background, and I thought this would contrast really well with it. Alright, once we get this done, we'll add just a little bit of that sage to this, and that will finish this piece off so we can attach it to that background. So I'm just going to line up my little handle on the bottom, kind of where I want it. And then I'm going to place the gold, it's a planter actually is what I'm going to call it, on the top, just making sure that I get them spatial to each other. What I'm going to do with the handle, like I said, we're going to use some small, I have some antique little screws. And with the top piece, I really thought about using screws with it, but I didn't see a place that kind of was like a circle that I could put them in, and I was afraid it wouldn't hold. So we're going to use some E6000 and a little bit of hot glue just for, the hot glue is only going to be for a temporary hold. The E6000 will hold this really well on here because it is a heavy piece. You all have to let me know what you think about this one. So for me, the background is really interesting, especially with this sort of planter on the front. However, it's very busy, so I'm a little on the fence about it, but I do love how it gives it a larger, grander look. Let me know what you think. This next project is going to be fairly easy. I want you to think about something you might have in your stash that looks like a hook or maybe just a little metal insignia or shield, and grab a piece like I am here. This is just an old wood sign that someone's made for like a pool table room. I'm going to just take that hook off the back because we're going to flip this and use it a different way. And I want to put some wallpaper on this one. Now, I know the last one we used some decoupage paper. I'd like to use a lot of different mediums to show you all, even napkins, stamping, stenciling. So you can see there's lots of ways to do this kind of stuff. I'm just making sure my hook is going to fit inside of this sort of framed area. You can always flip over and use a side that doesn't have a framed end, but I thought the frame would make this look even more grander. So I have this paper, wallpaper I got from Temu, really inexpensive. I'm just going to cut out a piece of what I think would look good in the background, trying to show at least one of those birds that's on there and some of the roses. I just kind of measure out and then cut that. And basically just peel the back off this. This is a sticky wallpaper, removable, so you can see the grid line on there. I just kind of went by that and cut my piece out how I wanted it. And I'm just going to go for it. I'm pulling the whole piece off right at the top and just doing a start area there. And as I go down, I'm going to smooth it out, making sure I don't have any bubbles come up in it, because that's something you definitely don't want. Smoothing as I go with my little Mod Podge, it's not really a scraper, I'm trying to think of the word for it, but it doesn't have a blade on it, so it's rubbery, and it just helps get all those bubbles out and gets it really stuck down. Now this is very sticky wallpaper, even though it is removable, and you won't have any problem keeping this in place. Once I get that finished, then I'm going to go ahead and take a paint color that kind of matches the leaves in this background. Now you could have took the pink or a different color to bring out, but I really wanted to pop this, kind of looks like frosted leaves, a sage color, so I'm using Folk Art Sage and just going around the frame. And I'm not being too worrisome about if I get any paint on the wallpaper, because we're going to shadow that some. I'm going to show you that coming up. Anytime you put a wallpaper down, and sometimes even a napkin, you'll have that edge that maybe doesn't look so smooth. And sometimes people will put things like twine over those edges, but for this piece I like to use, or a lot of my pieces, I like to either use paint to shadow and blend that line, but I'm going to use this rub and buff because we're going to end up using the rub and buff also on the frame, because we want to tie in that big hook that we're adding to this, or double hook, has that fleur-de-lis on it. I'm just taking my finger and kind of smoothing that, smearing it. We don't want it to be a perfect line. We want it to, you know, kind of look shadowed. Now I'm just adding it onto the frame. Now I did not seal the chalk paint, and you know I've talked about this so many times. I like to seal my paints before I put any type of wax, and of course I forgot. So since I did, it looks a little splotchy. Now to fix that, I'm going to take some clear wax and just brush over the gold and all of the paint, and just take a paper towel and blend it, and it really makes a difference. So if you feel like your wax is splotchy because you didn't seal that flat paint, this is a way to get it smoothed out, and now it's going to give it like a heathered look and age that color to blend in with the gold that we already have on there. Once I get that how I like it, now I'm going to take the hook, which has sort of the 90s brassy, kind of reminds me of that whole Italian look color, and I'm just going to add some of this rub and buff that we've already used on the frame over this, not completely covering all that. We'll have some of that sort of bronzy look coming through. Once I get that done, then we'll go ahead and just add that onto the frame. And this already has 2 holes for hanging right below the tips of that fleur-de-lis in the center. So I'm going to use screws for that, and I'll show you how we cover those screws up coming up. Now you can use things like rivets or maybe flat-headed gems. I'm going to use these half beads that I had in my stash. Before I put them on, I'm going to go ahead and just put a coat of that rub and buff so they'll blend in well with the piece. I'm going to add some of this E6000, just a touch of hot glue for that immediate hold, and that finishes this piece off. I'm thinking maybe a little bit of dark wax or some black wax on the gold metal would blend in a little better with this background. Let me know what you think. This next project is definitely a dark and moody. Now I'm not saying that some of these we've already done couldn't fall into that category, but this one's kind of has the dark academia aesthetic. I have started with this little tiny frame. I had to make my own little background because it didn't have one, and I'm using one of the images from Roycycled's catalog images to go on here, just using my glue stick, smoothing that out. And then I'm going to cut around that image, just getting the excess off. Once I do this, I decided that I wanted a clear, not glass, so I grabbed some packaging that was just clear acetate, and I'm just going to use that, cut around my image. We're going to use hot glue to glue that acetate into the frame, and then we're going to use hot glue to glue the image with the back piece on top of the acetate to finish that piece off. This is going on a larger project. Stay with me. Wait till you see what we do with it. For the next part of this, I have had this little piece in my stash for a while, and I really wasn't sure what to do with it. I love the design, all of the carving look to it. I think I paid $2 for this. It has a couple little spots that's missing, been chipped off. And then I have this lamp base. I paid $3 for it at a Goodwill. I thought, what better way to make this piece look larger on a grander scale than to add it to either a candle holder or this lamp base, which looks kind of like a candle holder. So look in your supplies and your thrifted items and see if you have something small that can sit on top of a candelabra to give it an even larger scale, more grand look. I needed to do something with that top piece because when I sit it on top of this lamp, it has a very hard edge. So in order to fix that, I thought, why not just sand that kind of hard edge to give it more of a rounded edge like the edges on all the lips of the lamp base. So I just grabbed my little sander, and this is made out of some type of, not necessarily resin, but it sanded super easy and rounded off so very easy. So that kind of fixed my dilemma with the transition from the bottom of this to the top of the base of the lamp. So once we get that done, I actually take hot glue and fill in those little areas that's chipped off, and the way the hot glue bubbles up, it mimics the area really well. So we're going to use some E6000 to connect these two together with a little bit of hot glue down in that center just for that quick grab. I'm going to let this dry overnight. Once this is dried, I go ahead and just add some hot glue also into that little crack and sort of smooth it out. Now you can use clay, you can use caulk for this and for those little places, but you see there my hot glue is dried and it's bubbled up nicely. To add this frame, I have added some half beads exactly on the back of this frame where they will fall into those curves, and it worked amazing. I was trying to figure out the best way to add this, and I had some of those tumbling tower blocks, and I was like, I need something curved. And I already had those half beads out, and this just worked amazing. So we're going to use some E6000, and because this is a odd surface, it's a bumpy surface, and I don't want to have to sit and hold it, I am going to use this super glue with the instant spray that activates it and holds it instantly. And once that E6000 dries overnight, we're going to have an even more permanent bond. To bring this piece together, we're going to use some paint to give it a complete look. I'm going to be using this Fusion cast iron color, with the first coat just being the paint by itself. Now for the second coat, because we have the hot glue up there in between the two pieces, and anytime you put something together, if you don't put a piece of rope or something to cover up that seam, sometimes you have some gaps. So I thought the additive of, we're going to use Dixie Belle Texture Sea Spray, I think is what it's called. You'll see coming up, I show you. I had bought this on clearance when someone was going out of business for $6. It's like $30 a bag, but I'm going to be using that for my second coat. I did want to mention that the base of the lamp was very sleek because it's brass, but the piece that I added on the top actually had some texture of its own. You can see if you look at it the difference. So we needed to add texture to that base anyways, and it gave it such a unique look. I just didn't want to overdo it, and there was some quite large clumps that dried, and I just kind of pick those back or pick them off so they weren't so standoutish, because I didn't want a bunch of bumpy stuff all over, but just a little bit of texture. I don't show it, but I do go over this quite a few times with that texture paste or sea spray, and I take what's left and go in between all those beads and make that a solid area. It turns out looking really, really nice. For our last step, we have to have some gold on here. Now again, use any color of your choice, leave this solid black. But before we do that, I'm giving the clear wax and wiping that back some. That way I can wipe some of my wax back once I get it on there if I don't like how it looks. Now I just showed you, I'm going to use some Prima Burgundy to start out just to see if I like it. And I do like it, but my heart was set on gold, and I tried to deviate from what I really want to try new things, and sometimes I just go back to what I know that I like. So again, this is a personal preference. We're going to go over all of this with the gold. I did leave a little bit of the gold showing on that frame because I didn't mind some of that coming through. It would just blend in nicely with this. Once this is done, of course, we have our piece. Let me know what you all think about this one. Now, if you stayed until the end, tell me how much you love Dark and Moody in the comments below by either leaving me an emoji or typing something out. I want to say thank you to all those who stayed till the end, all of my subscribers from the beginning, all you new ones. I can't wait to be talking to you more. I will see you hopefully sooner in the next video.